Before you and I dive headfirst into the Matrix, I want to address an important topic. When and why is DMT frightening? Well, for starters, I'm not going to lead you astray by saying DMT doesn't frighten me. Yes, DMT is in fact frightening, but it really isn't at the same time. Please, let me explain. You see, DMT humbles me every single time I smoke it, in which, let it be known, I used to use the word scares in that sentence, but I've resolved that that is not the appropriate word. DMT doesn't scare me. It is not knowing where it is going to take me that is what makes me bite my tongue and humble myself to its power. Because smoking DMT is, without a doubt in my mind, like knocking on the God's door and saying, hey, I'm here, but where are you? Why can't I see you in my life? Which actually piggybacks on why I believe and preach the purge is so very important. But I'll elaborate on that in the next segment. DMT is humbling because at the end of the day, it is essentially like submersing yourself into a virtual reality in which the time on the clock is your only escape should you by chance emerge somewhere that is perceptually frightening. A virtual reality that generally offers you grounding simply by opening your eyes and finding that everything is right in place and you aren't in fact now living within a Pixar movie. Thus, the reason I personally have found DMT can be frightening is when you take it to levels most people generally don't care to take it to, which I, of course, employed the challenge with an ever-curious mind. But most of these experiences weren't frightening because I was seeing scary or demonic images. They were frightening because they took from me my baseline and transformed my external reality. Eyes open, completely engulfing me within this Toy Story-like video game world where everything was constantly morphing and evolving whilst shattering every law of physics man has concocted. Mind you, this has only happened a handful of times, but as you might imagine, for an inexperienced traveler, it could be quite overwhelming, even potentially interpreted as frightening. This is where being seasoned in psychedelics offers its comforts, because I knew what I was signing up for when I chose to ingest a substance at such quantities. It's just like ingesting any toxic substance. Once it's in you, the only thing you can do is wait until it's out of you. Yes, it will end. No, you won't have a permanent trip. Whilst generally speaking, bad trips are in fact quite rare. Coincided, strangely enough, bad experiences are often incredibly insightful and can be transformational in their own way, which I actually have a story on revolving around bloomers, magic mushrooms, that I'll elaborate upon in another segment. You see, DMT is frightening because it is powerful, and what it shows you, which I'll elaborate on next, the doors it can open, the pathways to thought and creativity it creates, the errors in our ways it can show us, can truly be a lot to handle. And a complacent and conforming individual, the older the worse off, I would imagine can have trouble accepting the fact that they've in fact been debilitating their own growth and living a lie their whole life. Whilst some of these people tend to be control freaks and even power mongers, because that's what our status quo teaches us to seek to become. And what DMT shows you first and foremost is that you are powerless and utterly under control by divine aspects of the universe, which, if I may, is why such people tend to be frightened, have a bad experience, then deflect and deny the possibility of the truth that is so frightening to them become apparent, that the universe is in charge and there is in fact a system of checks and balances such individuals would be at the wrong end of the scale of. Ergo, why this revelation frightens them. One thing to note, one reason I find traveling uncomfortable is because the smoke of DMT can be harsh. And to truly blast off, you really need 3 good hits, and to hold each one for a good 20 seconds. The longer the better. But you see, these harsh hits would often leave me winded, and feeling winded right as my mind blasts off is kind of intrusive on the experience, as well as uncomfortable. but I wouldn't consider it bad. I would like to know quickly, although I found the way I smoke DMT to be the prominent method, recently I stumbled into a guy here on YouTube that gives what appears to be a better method, and if I can figure out how to link it, I'll add that here. Otherwise, just check my bio. Now, to the good stuff. I'd like to give you a rundown on what one can expect if they were to choose to be a degenerate of society like me and experiment with things like DMT that society tells us not to experiment with. As my experiences span what I like to think of as the whole spectrum. But in reality, and understanding DMT as I do probably isn't even close. Let's start with the most profound visual experiences, shall we? Who wants to hear a story? In 2015, I was at one of my all-time lows after truly becoming awakened to human nature in this world owned by all the wrong people. Whilst all the right people are currently living in the streets and in the gutter and are being ignorantly and arrogantly judged and treated like garbage. Well, I was trying so hard to have this particular experience for so long that after I had it, I simply couldn't believe it. I didn't believe in a God, and thus this must have just been a trick. Let me first remind you, I've defined DMT in my last segment as a conduit that sparks the feelings, actions, and emotions that elicit a very particular sequence of events while one is in a state of heightened connection. What I mean by this is, everything is under control. Thus, the music playing, us elbowing the phone and the music changing the song, the exact animations visualized in each moment, the mirror in front of us, the crystal in our hand. Everything is exactly where it is supposed to be and happens exactly as it is supposed to happen. Do you see what I mean? Thus, one only ever enters into this state of heightened connection when, where, how, and with whom the universe has scripted within its plan to use as its tools of enlightenment. Whilst the revelations can come from anywhere, i.e. the visuals, from a conversation, from banging on a drum, from the music, etc. Well, let me tell you. Setting the stage, I was up top a mountain in the Berkshires with an old friend and two of her girlfriends. The four of us trying to blast off, though not even I was having any luck, so we ended up going into the car to get out of the wind. That's when it hit me. There I was, roaring down one of the biggest hits I could handle and holding my breath until my face warmed, when the clouds opened, revealing the sun's blazing rays of light directly upon us, out of which came 5 or 6 gigantic Optimus Prime Autobots, all of them reaching down from the sun towards me as if to grab a hold of me. Now, as I'm already pretty much holding my breath in amazement, whatever the song was playing at this exact moment, the message the universe relayed to me, pairing these dauntingly massive golden robots with the music, was, in a nutshell, something like, "Don't worry. Why are you so worried? We've got your back." Let me tell you what. This was all I ever saw and more, but at the time, I just couldn't fully believe it to be the divine connection it is claimed as, which I without a doubt in my mind now do. Moving forward, one of the things I like to do when I travel with DMT is to what I call venture. Usually I'd say it is time to venture when myself or whoever I was with had been chasing the rabbit, usually around our 7th to 10th blast off. And what this means is, each of us would take our 3 to 6 hits, and then, with the help of our sober sitter spotting us, we would get up and literally go adventure, go play and interact with the world. Whereas, usually what we do is lay in a line on a bunch of pillows and blankets, take our hits, lay back, and close our eyes until the experience fades away. Let me tell you what, this one time, we called it was time to venture. So, I puffed my hits and my buddies puffed theirs. Then our sober sitters helped us up. From here, after struggling to blast off the last few times, which tends to happen after your 5th or 6th blast off, which is what I call chasing the rabbit, I was bummed as ever. Man, what a bust. Then it hit me. The stairs leading out of the room all of a sudden glistened in golden rainbow like the Asgardian bridge. And as far as my eyes were telling my brain, I was walking straight out across this bridge. Though in reality, I was traversing down the stairs with a friend's hand on my back. You see, I knew I was walking down the stairs in the back of my mind, but my brain was telling and showing me that I was in fact an Asgardian walking across this Asgardian bridge, making golden footprints traced in rainbow, echoing out into the universe. My hands had evolved into 3 fingers versus 5. Literally, I saw 3 giant fingers like alien fingers, which was so friggin' cool. Then someone had the bright idea to hand me a basketball. This wasn't a bright idea. Immediately, the ball started glowing red in my hands, teasing me to power it up. So, sitting on the couch with about a dozen other guys surrounding me, I got the bright idea that I was going to see if I was in fact an alien Super Saiyan. I started to shout, "Yeah, man! Yeah, man!" And then I heard one of my friends say, "Holy shit, he's gonna do it." Hilarious. No one tried to stop me. It was entirely just accepted as something that was just going to happen. But that kid's voice grounded me, because in the reality I was temporarily living within, that Kamehameha wave was about double in size and was about to, no joke, put a hole through the fabric of space and time. But because I heard this guy, despite my state of utter amazement, I remembered that I was actually on a venture in a living room with a dozen other guys and, oh yeah, a 100-inch flat screen TV that was about to get a basketball thrown through it. Now, taking a step back from these extremes, being most people don't experience external reality shift from my experience. Most of what I just mentioned, should the universe choose to show you something similar to me, will entirely be behind one's closed eyelids, screened as if a movie. Now, as you saw with the story mentioned above, revolved around myself feeling as if I was walking across a flat and level bridge, when in reality I was walking down a steep flight of stairs. DMT has the ability to shift your point of view, your reality of being able to perceive something from your 2 eyes, to sometimes points of view that really just boggle the mind, as if you were in fact one with the experience occurring and it was one with you. Like you can see all of it entirely simply because you are all of it entirely, whilst coincided viewing from a first-person point of view or from a multitude of points of view at the same time. I say DMT truly boggles the mind, and this is what is so valuable about it, because again, it shows you possibilities that aren't possible until you witness them for yourself, and thus not having those tools is limiting to your own spiritual growth, which is one huge reason why we must end the stigma and correct the propaganda against drugs, particularly naturally occurring substances that we need to be studying rather than shunning and degrading both the drug and its users. Thus, with all that in mind, the experience I have probably most commonly is almost like I am absorbed into a pop-up picture book. You see, with DMT, everything is constantly moving and morphing and evolving. So it is like I am one with this picture book and we are flipping through the pages together from all these strange perceptions just mentioned. From here, I will very commonly enter into what appears like your stereotypical white picketed fence home, showing me this uninspired and uncreative straight line that each of us seek to live, because this world owned by darkness has everyone so damn afraid of being different and standing out. And then diving into this infinite dimensional space that is in a constant state of perpetual fluctuation, evolution, and metamorphosis. Generally, in this particular experience, there tends to be a female guide of sorts. Most people tend to mention a female entity rather than a male, but be it known, these entities or guides come in all different forms. This guide who is dancing to the rhythm of the music and to the vibe of the experience as we flip through the pages together, herself transforming into different forms. For example, in other experiences, I've had her show up as like a cartoon DNA strand with M&M symbols dotted about the DNA ribbon. HD, mind you. Everything on DMT is like watching next-gen TV that we haven't even thought of yet. Then she started melting into chocolate, and I could literally feel drips dripping onto my chest. I was literally a giddy child rolling around on the pillows with the other guy saying, "Chocolate Wonderland," or something like this. My first experience was hardly anything like you've just heard above, but it paints this particular picture perfectly. For my first blast-off attempt, I didn't really know what to do, and my guide didn't really tell me. So I kind of just sat there with my eyes open as my reality shifted to looking like this palm tree was an alien from a Pixar movie with all these eyes on its leaves that kept blinking every time I changed the way I perceived them, just before getting up and running to take a piss. My friend thought this was bizarre. I had my venturing legs before I even knew it. The second time was much more subtle, but the gentle melodic ocean melody my friend had chosen to play introduced me to my 3 red-colored guides. These 3 feminine silhouettes, 2 moving in gyrations, standing tall, and the other as if on her hands and knees, also motioning like the ocean, parallel to me. As the experience peaked, my 3 guides ended up engulfing me in their loving comfort. I remember the first one wrapping her arms around me and thinking that someone was messing with me in real life. So I opened my eyes to check. No one was remotely close to me. So immediately I slammed my eyes shut and thought, "Come back, come back, come back, come back." The entities again engulfed me in their loving presence for the remaining minute or 2 of my experience. As it finished, when they started to slowly back away, I remember reaching my arm out and feeling one's hand brush her fingertips off of mine. Then they danced away and again became one with that which they came. Do you see? The things that happen on DMT can be unimaginably random and can be a vast spectrum of super simple to super complex. But it is trying to figure out why you are shown those things that becomes the challenge. Personally, I find there is generally a theme to the experience in which deciphering that theme could be huge to decoding the message. Now, are you ready for me to blow your mind again? Not only can DMT show you complex animations, far more complex than anything we can yet generate on a computer, it can also show you real-life images, HD memories. This only ever happened to me once that I can recall, and I hadn't even known it was possible until about a week or 2 before, when a friend blasted off with me for the first time. I remember I was having a pretty profound experience on my own, but I was well desensitized to the majesty of that which is DMT. I believe I was in this mega cool cartoon rocket ship blasting off through space and time when I heard from the reclining chair next to me, "Mom?" At this point, I had to open my eyes, but I didn't want to ruin his experience, so I waited for him to come to on his own. When he came to, he jumped to his feet, hugged me, and said, "Oh my God, I saw my family! I saw my mom! I saw my sister!" I explained how even for me, this was a unique phenomenon, one which I couldn't relate to because it hadn't ever happened to me before, other than in strange perception-bending ways, like kind of mending cartoon and real-life images into the flipbook experience mentioned above. Though it took me a long time and lots of retrospective thought to really notice this. One thing I find it important to know, so much happens, and there is just generally so much information transfer that, like a dream, retaining the experience can be difficult if one isn't writing them down immediately after the fact, or during, with regards more so to ayahuasca. Well, this one time, again, during this time of mental rock bottom of mine back in 2015, I was craving an experience, so I broke out the pipe to see if I'd have any luck. Well, for starters, I was immediately engulfed by these super soft, pink, fluffy, and pillow-like cat-like beings, just rubbing themselves all over me. And despite perhaps perceptually being strange or unusual, which isn't uncommon with DMT, and that's because what our ignorant status quo defines as unusual isn't what the universe defines as unusual. It was truly comforting and really exactly what I was seeking. Albeit, I find it important to note, at this time, I wasn't setting intentions and I didn't realize, or I wasn't accepting, that in my head, I felt alone, and it was comfort that I was craving, which is quite easy to pinpoint now in retrospect as to why I kept having those experiences of comfort present themselves. Because I might not have known it, but the universe did, and that's what it knew I most needed. It was halfway through this experience that the visuals changed, and I, for the first time I can really recall, saw real-life images of friends and family. Now, I want to really hammer home how the animations interact with things like the music playing, and how when unsuspected things happen, not to fight against them, but to embrace them as part of the plan, unless it is uncomfortably intrusive, which you should air immediately to your guide so they can work to create the most conducive environment for you. Personally, one of my favorite songs to blast off to is MGMT, Time to Pretend. So, we'd been listening to this song, and I believe I was having my more typical experience with the pop-up picture book visuals, when I elbowed my phone accidentally and the song changed. Right there, in that exact moment, the experience was like night and day, a complete 180 of theme. The song changed to Ellie Goulding, Anything Could Happen, and my God, was this another one of those wow experiences, or what? I never even heard this song, but it was exactly what I needed in that moment in my life, when paired with the universe's visuals, which, unfortunately, my memory has faded as to what I saw. I just clearly remember the wow factor, but I think it had something to do with coming to certain revelations regarding the white picketed fence house. Again, one couldn't expect, remember, expectations are no bueno, to choose that song and have that experience I had. That experience was unimaginably unique to myself, as well as the two other individuals in the room in that exact moment, who were each having their own experience as well. So, that in mind, keeping things as random as possible is so very important, because things like this happen, and it is meant to happen. So let it happen. As a guide, I like to invite people to give suggestions for me to cater to them, but even I tend to stick with Pandora or shuffle on a particular playlist, as to take control away even from myself. But the message you choose to let in as a guide is so important, because you want triumphant, you want symphonic, you want climactic, you want peaceful and airy, you want beautiful, you want harmonic, you want transcendental. You don't want ignorant and hard. You don't want intrusive and obnoxious. Things like this. Whilst what a person or group is vibing with is always going to be constantly changing. So, whether you are a guide or a traveler, control without controlling. The experience should be as natural as possible. Let the universe do the contriving as much as you can. Nextly, as mentioned above, in the DMT verses, things can seem unusual. And what I mean by that is that we humans, amidst our superficial and duplicitous popularity contests, set these social precedents as a means of maintaining corrupt hierarchy and our own selfish triumph and desires for the world to cater to us. But these social precedents are often far from right. Oftentimes, they are simply rules for the sake of rules, for the sake of the darkness maintaining control. Now, this is going to get the tiniest bit graphic and quite perceptually strange, but this is an important story to tell. Sometimes, the journey DMT forces you on can be built as more of a lesson than for its enjoyment. What I mean is, occasionally I'd have things happen that almost seem like these animations are doing something strange, like peeing on me or something. But it is happening like a light switch, on, off, whilst pairing itself with the thoughts in my mind, which are essentially creating this experience for one reason or another. You see, the animation would do something weird, and I'd think, oh, not sure I like that. Then it would stop, and I'd be like, ah, better. Then it would repeat this in a cyclic manner until I got the message. Everything in DMT seems to come in these ever-evolving cyclic animations. But what I learned from this experience is that this is how we humans learn, through trial and error, not through concocting unwarranted social precedents simply as a means of creating control and selfish triumph, and then propagating and forcing others to conform to them as a means of creating a system of carefully controlled castes. This lesson, in fact, directly correlates to Daniel Quinn's theory that the tribal method of developing rules and social precedents happens over thousands of years of trial and error, not through the leaders of Western civilization and thus the game of triumph, who simply make rules that serve themselves and their own happiness, rather than the happiness of the collective community. For starters, I find it in no way, shape, or form coincidental that The Matrix was my favorite movie as a child, that The Matrix happened to be the movie I was watching in the same 2015 timeframe when I had the epiphany that I could write a book people would enjoy, and that during this experience, I was shown the coding of all that is. I was shown that we are living in the Matrix. What I saw was everything normal, but beating down the room, just like the green characters of The Matrix, although these were more blue, were a combination of seemingly alien characters like glyphs of sorts, as well as recognizable numbers and letters. Just again, at the time, I couldn't believe it as more than a trick of the universe. I couldn't piece all these experiences together and recognize the theme. But the fact is, none of it was random. The universe was trying to talk to me. I just didn't know how to listen. Anyone who might find themselves reading or watching this now, I encourage you to check out Psyched Substance's YouTube channel, who greatly influenced me to speak out on my experience with this substance, and Joe Rogan's podcast, both individuals being greatly knowledgeable on the topic of psychedelic awareness. Also, Rick Strassman's book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, is a superb source of scientific information, albeit where some of the patient's descriptions of the animations were spot on. I find it lacks an answer as to why certain individuals might have saw what they saw, what the frightening or inviting images were trying to relate to them about themselves, about the people they surround themselves with, or the environments they place themselves in. Because the science doesn't offer insights on how to interpret these messages that an experienced traveler might be able to. What is important to remember is, at the end of the day, DMT is trying to talk to you. The important part is being able to get to the root of how and with what. Tune in next week for my next segment, where I'll be elaborating on the God experience and why I believe the purge to be so important to this experience as a whole. Until then,